Welcome to Your Future Starts Now, the go-to podcast for extraordinary women who are ready to step into their next chapter with authentic confidence. I'm your host, Gia Lacqua, empowerment coach, motivational speaker, children's book author, and girl mom. Whether you're a corporate powerhouse or an entrepreneur, this show is designed for you. Your Future Starts Now is more than just a podcast. It's a movement towards rewriting the rules of success for high-achieving women. Are you ready to get unstuck and step into your next chapter? If so, you're exactly where you need to be. Your future starts now. Welcome to Your Future Starts Now. I'm your host, Gia Lacqua. Thanks for tuning in today. I am thrilled to introduce you to Allison Hare. Allison is a former sales executive turned women's lifestyle coach with a special heart for over-functioning moms who secretly are running themselves into the ground, but nobody would ever know. She's the host of the award-winning top 1.5% globally ranked podcast, Late Learner, and a personal coach for professional mothers and a keynote speaker. Allison, welcome to the show. Thanks for being here.
Gia, thank you for having me. I'm so thrilled to be here.
Such an honor. So Allison, you and I think do, the work that we do is very similar. And you and I both work with, professional women who are overwhelmed and typically underfulfilled. But there's a key term that you and I both use, and I think it would be good to just start there as a point of reference. Can you talk a little bit about overfunctioning? What is overfunctioning? What does it look like? And how does that show up?
Yeah, thank you for that. Overfunctioning is actually, it's another way to say burnout, if I'm being completely honest, because people that are overfunctioning are doing it all. They're doing it all because they can do it all. And so I think that generationally, like we're raised in kind of a Gen X millennial generation where the messaging was, I want you to be everything you can be. You can be anything you want as a woman. You can be anything you want. You should also get the degree, get the big job, get the stable income. But also the messaging has always been, you also need to be rail thin skinny. You need to make sure that you bounce right back after pregnancies. You don't skip a beat. You're doing it all. And so I think that the overfunctioning was kind of a result of, like the confused messaging of doing it all meant like, well, I can do it all. So I'm going to do it all. I do it better. I have more control that way. And I think you get to a certain point in life. Usually I've seen you hit around 40, and again, it could happen, but it happens more and more where you kind of are playing into, well, let me just get the house, get me, let me get the kids and get married and do all of these things. And then you're working, you get the corner office, you have maybe a little cushion financially, and you look around and you're like, wait a minute, I don't know why I'm not happy. Like I'm so appreciative. I love what I've done. I'm grateful, but I also feel guilt because why can't this be enough? Why do I feel like there's something knocking on my door that says your purpose is not what you're doing right now? And that tension and that frustration is like, well, if, the messaging was always, if you work harder, then you'll get what you want. You need to outwork. It was that hustle culture. And now I think it's just unwinding. And I think that those deeply embedded messages were that you have to overfunction. You have to always be on the go because that is how your value is measured.
Oh, absolutely. I think what you said is so powerful and probably resonates with millions of women. So the overfunctioning is so interesting because I think a lot of the times we don't know that we're stuck in the overfunctioning zone, right? And the other part of the challenge, I think, is yes, we are so caught up in the external expectations and checking the box of things that we think we're supposed to do, realizing that, to your point, maybe we're not fulfilling our purpose or fulfilling what we need internally. But there also becomes this external expectation of, well, she can do it, right? And then the demand becomes even greater of, oh, I'll just let her do it, right? So when we overfunction, what happens is other people underfunction. And I think that can become a very, very vicious cycle and very challenging to break, especially on your own. So, yeah, thanks for explaining that. How did you get to where you are today? You have a background in sales. Tell us a little bit about your personal journey.
Yeah, it's funny because when I was younger, I'm one of 7 children. My mom and dad had 6 kids together. My mother was the stay at home mom, and she beat it into me and my sister's heads: never rely on a man to make money, always make your own, because she did not make that choice. And
Mhm.
she really, really paid for it. Like she really struggled with her health, with finances till the day she died. And so I kind of took that, like I want to make my mom proud. I want to make my dad proud. My dad was a workaholic. That was like, bing, workaholic,
Yes.
and that kind of paved the way for my entire career. And I'm still a workaholic. It's always a work in progress. Some of those habits really do die hard, but it turned into where I had a lot of creative things that I wouldn't have acknowledged as creative. I wasn't painting or singing or doing any of those things. But where I felt like I was coming alive was on a microphone. And I found my college radio station and had a radio show, and it was just all I wanted to do was to be on radio. And when I got out of college, I applied for, like, I think I sent like a stack of pizzas with my resume and a demo tape on top, and the demo tape was a total disaster. And they, like they thanked me for the pizza, but the answer was no. And throughout my whole career, the creative side was talking on a mic, was journalism, was being able to interview people, being able to have meaningful conversations, be able to share ideas before TED Talks were a thing. And I always ended up picking the money, and the money was sales, right? Like the money was, and I was great at it. And I'm still great at it. So like being able to do that and being rewarded, I always put the creative side on a shelf, and just ended up working in these higher and higher positions in the corporate world, in corporate sales. So I worked for, huge Fortune 500 companies, Salesforce, DocuSign, ADP, and was really well rewarded with trips, with money, with 401k, with retirement, with all of the things, like my husband, my kids are going to private school, all of these things where I had the comforts. But it felt like the further I got away from the creative side, or that, the more dissonance I felt, that I was not fully expressed. I felt like when I went into work, I would do these creative things. Like I would join Toastmasters. I started the podcast 5 years ago. I ran a music blog where I would interview emerging artists, and I would just do it on the side. And I thought, well, if
Mhm.
I can pay the bills during the day and, kind of whet my appetite for creativity on the side, and also noting the ego involved of like, what am I going to do, quit and become a yoga instructor? There was a lot of ego built
Yeah.
into kind of what that looks like, of what happens if you pivot. But it got to a point where I just could no longer put on the mask, and I was starting to get anxiety attacks. I thought I was having a heart
Mhm.
attack. I didn't know. I didn't suffer from that before, but it really showed up physically. And there were a couple of glimmers of hope that kind of became the catalyst that changed everything for me. So I ended up leaving my corporate um, life in 2022 after a tarot reading that said it was time to go. And I was
Wow.
like, well, it must be in the cards. It's time to go. And I somehow got my husband on board, and it's been a wild odyssey ever since. But yeah, that's the Cliff Notes version.
That's amazing. I love it. So, one thing I do want to take a moment to recognize and appreciate about what you just said in your story is you felt called to the microphone in some way, right? Like you had this instinct that it was something that you enjoyed and something perhaps that you were meant to do, and you explored that. And I think that's so incredibly powerful when we can tap into our intuition and really explore what's coming up for us, because I think so often as women we're conditioned to suppress and ignore.
right? The feelings that
Mm.
are coming up, and sort of just keep marching on, keep on keeping on. And so
Mhm.
I love that you were able to do that and then sort of unearth that actually drove you to a greater purpose, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Do you want to hear what happened? That was so wild.
Absolutely.
Okay. So I was like at the height of my burnout, and I used to work out from 5 till 5:30 in the morning. I worked with a trainer, and everything from 5:30 till 9:30 at night was owed to somebody else. I was working,
Mhm.
I was, handling kid stuff and
Sure.
podcast stuff, like everything was owed. But that little sliver of time was all I had. Um, and my trainer had gone away for a week on vacation, and it was around Christmas, so I actually had a little bit of flexibility because I'm an overfunctioner, so I would plan every single moment of my day every day, and that was what felt comfortable for me because I didn't have to stop and think that I might not be happy. I don't want to mess the apple cart. And I started looking in ClassPass. You guys, do you know what ClassPass is? It's like it's this aggregate of participating gyms that you can go in and you pay a membership to ClassPass, and you can drop into, a whole myriad of gyms and studios, whatever it is, fitness stuff. So I
Mhm.
remember like, what should I do while he's gone? And I was like, should I do weightlifting or HIIT workouts? And I was like, wait a minute, what do I want to do? And
Mhm.
I was like, I want to dance. I want to go take a dance class. I always thought that was fun. I have no dance background. I took this dance class, and I felt like I was struck by lightning. And there were like 60 people in it. It was dark. The mirrors were sweaty because there were so many people. Like you couldn't even
Mhm.
see in the mirror, which was great because I was I wasn't in my head. I was more in my body. And it felt like I was struck by lightning. And not that I picked up the moves really easily. I didn't. I'm still pretty uncoordinated. But it felt like freedom. It felt like
Mhm.
this intense rush of like feeling good. And I remember asking myself, am I allowed to feel this good? Which is
Mm.
such a messed up question to ask, Like I was so used to just being wound so tight, just doing, that the ability to like open your arms wide and take up space and move your body and be in your body again was pivotal for me. And I ended up becoming a dance fitness instructor because I was like, I want to give this to more women,
Yeah.
and also challenge myself. It was almost like it was like this little open door of fun, right? Like I call it fractures of light, where, you just outgrow where you are. And so if you're in an egg and it's cracking and there's light, what happens if you push on that crack?
Mhm.
And that's what I did from a dance perspective. But continuing to do the dance thing, um, it felt like I was restoring confidence and I was feeling what joy looked like again. And so, like the microphone, like being on a podcast, I felt completely in my element. Like it felt like it feels so bad at work. It was like a total no feeling in my body for work, where I just felt like I was faking it. And being on the mic and dancing felt like a total yes feeling. But like
Mm.
from a practical standpoint, what do I do? And so that was the question. And, when I did leave my corporate job, I left with no plan on purpose. And I made one decision, and that I was going to make no decisions until I could hear my own voice again. And it took months. It took so
Mhm.
many months, and it took some very unconventional approaches. And in the meantime, I had found Brand Builders Group, which is how we are connected, a personal brand strategy firm. And that really, really helped kind of define, what am I going to do next? How do I
Mhm.
make a viable business with all the skills and talents and, passions that I have, and put it where I can be of service to the
Yeah.
world and not be burning out and over functioning. That was a long answer to your question, Gia.
No, that's such an incredible story. I love it. And I also have, I actually have a dance background, and it is so liberating and
You
freeing.
do?
It is, I do. And it's a form
What
of
is it?
artistic expression. So I spent 15 years as a dancer. I did competition when I was younger. I was a dance instructor
Oh,
for a period of time. And I joke around that dance was my first language because I think it's such a
oh,
creative form of expression, right? There's things that you can't put into words, but you can express in different forms of art. And I think dance can
I
just be
love
so
that.
powerful. Yeah. So totally relate to you on that. Um, and I love that you explored that and asked yourself, what do I want? I think we don't
Yeah.
ask ourselves that question enough. What do I want? Right? Because we're fulfilling everybody else's needs and demands. Or my favorite is like, what do I need? What do I need in this moment? And just pausing.
Yeah.
And to your point, finding your voice, like understanding what is going on in your body. That mind body connection is so powerful, and then being able to find your voice is so important. And the authenticity, right? It sounds like you were able to really step into your power by finding what felt authentic to you and what felt
Yeah.
purposeful and meaningful to you. So it sounds like dance was a big part of that transformation for you in terms of stepping out of the over functioning. I'm curious, what other tools or strategies, anything else that you did that, helped you stepped out of the over functioning, persona and, your former role into where you are today?
Yeah. There are a bunch of things. I've actually put frameworks around some of this stuff. And I think, when I work with clients, one of the first things we do is how do you restore your energy? When you are so over functioning, you're depleted. And, like in my world, burnout is just a misalignment between your dreams and the activities you do all day. If you don't love what you're doing all day, then it's going to deplete your energy. And so the first thing is like a restoration. And it can be so simple. And some of the things that I've found that have been really helpful of what can restore your energy, it really is just a presence. And what I did was, what are some things that make me happy that doesn't take a lot of time?
Mm-hmm.
And one of the first things that I do with my clients is like, if you could put your hand on your heart, because it automatically will signal to your body that it's okay to rest, that you are being held. Like I'm putting my both hands on my heart, like I'm hugging my heart. So part of it is like, just what does it feel like to actually feel your shoulders lower? Just the act of having your shoulders lower, even though they may crawl right back up to earrings, that they may have been before. Just practicing that. And so one of the things, at least for me, like I made a whole list of them. And one of them is like drinking tea, like coffee, you can like pound a monster drink or whatever, but like tea, you sip, like you savor it. And
Mm-hmm.
so it's almost taking a moment to be present. For me, it really was nature. And what I had done when I left is I did a whole bunch of unconventional things and crazy stuff. Like I went and did solo overnight hikes. I did 12-hour walks. I did psychedelic assisted therapy. It was guided. I didn't even do that stuff in college, and it was all a desire to reconnect and really hear who am I? If I'm
Yeah.
not, superstar salesperson, if I'm not superstar earner, like, and that's what I was honestly taught to value, or what I assumed
Mm-hmm.
was my value. And so nature kind of brought a lot back to me, because it was the place where I didn't feel want for anything. I felt safe and held. And so some of the practical pieces of what we do is, where is your fuel and energy? And if you could list 10 to 15 things that truly light you up, not things you should do. Like if you don't feel like lifting weights, if that doesn't get you super excited, but you should do it, don't put it on your list. But make a list of like 10 or 15 things of just, what it feels like to just go outside in the morning and listen until you hear the birds. And that could be it. It could
Yeah.
take 30 seconds. Like listen until you can actually feel your body just start to relax. It really is like a regulation of your nervous system. So if you do that, every single day, even if it's just once, even if it's for 30 seconds, I know when you're over functioning and you're, feeling overwhelmed and underfulfilled. I really like that. I know it can be hard to find 10 minutes. It can be hard to find, the stillness enough to meditate. And in some people, meditation and peace is found in movement and in motion, and letting that be okay too. So really it's finding your own rhythm of what that looks like. And I even put together like a free PDF, where people can get energy, where it has like 40 different ideas, but also a worksheet for you so that you can like print it out and just have it in front of you so that you can easily just go there and give yourself permission to be present to you. And if it sucks, acknowledging that it sucks right now and letting that be okay, and holding yourself and just acknowledging with some compassion.
I love that. I love how you weren't afraid to try some of those different healing modalities and figure out what works for you, because you don't know, right? Until you try. I mean, I remember years ago, everybody was talking about meditation and that you have to meditate, and I couldn't meditate. I felt like I tried different apps. I tried different, instructors. I tried different times, different places. And for me, it was something I felt like I just couldn't do. And so sometimes sitting in that uncomfortable silence and just sitting with the feelings that come up is the most powerful thing you can do. And so it does take some practice and some work there.
Yeah.
So I love that. Tell me more about reinvention. What does reinvention mean to you? How, you've talked a little bit about your personal journey, but talk a little bit about shedding old identities and embracing a new version of yourself.
Oh, now you're talking my language, Gia. Like I work in a like kind of a 3-point framework. The first one is like, you got to get some energy, right? Like you got to figure out what your fuel and energy is. The second part is creating margin for yourself. And that looks like setting boundaries. And so I was taught that whenever you feel resentment towards somebody else, that's where a boundary needs to be set, which is a really hard truth of like, you have people and loved ones. And so creating margin in a lot of places is really taking a look at the identities, and a lot of them may look like, if you, I don't know, if you're, I'm not saying to ditch all your friends. That's not what I'm saying at all. But like taking stock of like, do I feel better? Do I feel fueled by this engagement? Or do you feel like maybe some of the passive aggressive digs, they might be kind of digging in there, or you become more judgy when you're with them, or you become more gossipy, like really defining, wait a minute, I actually have a choice here, and I have a choice of where do I invest my time. And I remember being in a group of friends. I used to be involved with CrossFit. So if you're into CrossFit, it's like it's a cult. I was proud of my cult CrossFit friends. But I had these friends that I had been getting together with for years. And as I was leaving my corporate job and really trying to figure out, like, there's a lot of emotional releasing and learning and unlearning that happens when you leave a corporate job. And one of my friends had told me, Allison, when you leave, you need to be ruthless about the people you spend your time with, because it is through no fault of their own, but it can take you down. And so really being intentional about the people you have close to you that are going to protect you and is going to move you forward is going to be really, really important. So I would start to see that I would see friends that I had been with for a long time, and they'd be like, why are you doing that? I don't get it. Why don't you just go get a job? Like, why don't you just find something better? And it was like, I can't, like I just have to keep a little more distance, even though I know they meant well. And again, it wasn't a ditching your friends like kind of thing, but it was like intentionally putting people in your zone. So that way you never have to, like, for me, the litmus test is if I find myself explaining in order for you to tell me that what I'm doing is validated, then that's a problem, but you can find communities that are like, that sounds like a great idea. Let's put a strategy and a execution plan together. Let's figure it out.
Yeah.
That is the kind of people that I want to hang out with. So it's important from like the energy piece, but then you're creating boundaries, creating margin. And then the other piece is the creative experiments. And that's where things get super exciting, because once you get a little bit of space and you start asking those questions, what do I want to do? Then you have license to just experiment. It doesn't mean that you're committed for life. If you want to take a hip hop class, go take a hip hop class. If you want to think about, you love landscaping. I don't know. Like I love pulling weeds. I find it really, really relaxing somehow. There's so many things that you can do that just light you up. And so part of it is like, again, making a list of like, what would be fun to do? Not like what would be prestigious, like, but what would really light you up? And it's kind of giving yourself permission to go down those rabbit holes. It's kind of like, oh, I keep meaning to Google, what would it be like, like questions or a different industry, or just looking online with no expectations and no commitments yet. You're just experimenting and finding people in your world that will support that mission and that will hold you accountable, and that will help guide you is really, really critical to making sure that people understand your language, they understand you, they understand where you're going, and surrounding yourself with people that will do it with you, or at least give you support to continue exploring. And it's okay to fail.
Totally. Such powerful advice. I love the way you talked about in terms of like reclaiming your energy, setting boundaries, finding the right people in your community, and examining your relationships, right? Figuring out who are the people in your corner. It is so hard. I have found sometimes we have to challenge long-standing relationships that we've had, right? Because we all grow as individuals, and if people aren't growing with you, sometimes that can be really difficult. And then the creative experiments and exploring what fuels you, what lights you up, and sometimes you don't know until you try. So I love that. You also talked about giving yourself permission, which is, I think, is really critical for high achieving women in terms of letting ourselves be in this space and explore, even though it doesn't subscribe to traditional measures of success, right, that we've been taught. And also unlearning, right? It's something that I've also, I focus a lot on in the work that I do, is unlearning the ingrained thinking, limiting beliefs, the patterns that we get stuck in. So I think that's super important as well.
Yeah.
I'm curious, when you think about women who might be in that phase where they feel stuck, they feel that fear of whether it be judgment or what's next, what if, right? We often get stuck in the what if cycle. So anyone who might be considering either a career change, relationship change, whatever that might be, what advice do you have for them? Like, what is that one step or one thing that they can do?
I think first is the acknowledgement of how important it is to feel like you belong, and belonging to those communities that may have really supported you in the past, and realizing you may have outgrown that. There is a mourning that happens. And I think collectively, we've all been experiencing it after the pandemic. I don't want to speak for everybody, but at least in my community and in general, I find that people after the pandemic have really taken stock, like they've learned how to work in a different way and realize that it doesn't have to be this way if it's not lighting you up, if it's not fulfilling, if it's under fulfilling, and you feel like, is there some other way that I need to show up and be fulfilled? And so I think acknowledging that tension is an activator. And so kind of recognizing that tension you feel and understanding that there is a mourning that happens as you walk away from a job, or even consider what that could look like, because now you're in a position of control and power. And so I think the power piece of like redefining that this is a powerful position that you get to redesign. You get to redesign right now, and know that it's not, like you just easily step off one platform and onto the other and everything's better. Like there's a lot that goes into it. So I think as people are considering what does that look like, you have to give yourself permission to let your mind wander
Mhm.
and write down like what are some wild ideas? What would be super fun? Things that would light you up and be, like maybe feel like you're being called to serve or want to explore something that you've never explored. For me, I think that the key is always novelty. That as you introduce something new, it could be even just taking a different route to take your kids to school in the morning, of just, like they say, even passion in your relationship. Like sometimes my husband and I have been married for like 12 or 13 years. And sometimes we'll say, you know what would be fun? Why don't we have a picnic on our floor? Like we don't have
Yeah.
to do
Yeah.
anything fancy or
Yeah.
spend a lot of money. We're doing it differently because we want to be intentional about novelty. And
Sure.
so figuring out what that could look like, again, it starts so small,
Yeah.
is just allowing yourself to take a different turn, to try something, to say yes to something that you want to say yes to, to call people that pop into your head or just text them, hey, I'm thinking about you. You never know. And just keeping those connections make a huge difference. And even like all the neuroscience says that just that novelty part of introducing something new opens new possibilities, new neural pathways that you can redesign. You're in power. You are in power when you do something new. And it is the easiest, simplest way to start is just by doing something new.
I love that. I had a guest on recently, and she said the advice that she got from a former boss and mentor was start by starting, right? And so it's
Uh-huh.
just, figure out what is that one step. And I think that is something so simple yet powerful, to your point, that we can do to shift our energy from being stuck to feeling empowered,
Yeah.
right? Which is so
Tension is
important.
an activator. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Allison, last question for you. We talk a lot about success and redefining success on this podcast. So I, would love to know from your perspective, how do you define success and how has that definition changed for you over time?
Yeah, this one is hard because I think I'm hardwired for money equals success.
Hmm.
And and being able to make a different relationship with money is an ongoing journey.
Yeah.
I remember my friend had called me and she said, Allison, if you are fast forward to 80 years old and you look back, what do you want your life to look like? And I remember I was sitting in a parking lot, I was talking to her, and there was like a sunset rather. So like the sky was fully beautiful. And I had left the corporate world, but I
Hmm.
had freedom. I had family. I have an incredible marriage and a very happy home, something I'm very, very precious about, And all I could concern myself was the money. Like, how do I figure this out? And I remember, like, wait a minute, it's right now. Like, I have the freedom. I have the freedom to experiment. I have the freedom, to be more present for my kids and my husband.
Hmm.
And I'm looking at this beautiful sunset. And I have a friend who's asking me this really smart question. So I think it really is in those small moments when you're present and you know you're okay. And that is part of like the power of just honestly just putting your hands on your chest. I'm not terribly woo woo. I mean, I think we all secretly are. But like there's a line, right? Like I don't have a sorceress on speed dial or anything, but like being able to calm your nervous system
Yes.
and be in a position where you are saying, I'm safe and I have everything I need. And for right now, I'm really happy about that. And
Hmm.
just, I think happiness is fleeting, but like finding the presence and knowing that you are supported and loved by the universe and God or whatever it is for you. I think the more you can access that, and again, it's not like I don't believe in toxic gratitude of like, just kind of railroading your feelings and saying, well, I'm so grateful. At least I have this. That's not what I mean at all. It's just
No.
being in your body and just being
Yeah.
present.
Yeah. And I love the advice of the hand over the heart. It's a technique that I use too. And I think there's something very powerful about it, and reconnecting with your body and some somatic work can go a
Yeah.
long way. So, I mean, we could talk for hours on end about
Yeah.
this
You
stuff.
sound like my people.
Yes, yes. So, Allison, I want to thank you so much for being here, for sharing your insights and expertise and, your story. How can our listeners connect with you? Where can they learn more about you?
Oh, thank you for sharing that. Well, the easiest way is Late Learner Podcast. And it is super fun. If you wanted to get that energy list, you can go to AllisonHare.com/energy, and I'll send you a free PDF of it. But AllisonHare.com, Allison__hair on Instagram is probably where I'm the most active. But thank you so much for this, Gia. This was really a pleasure.
Of course. Thank you, Allison. And of course, you can visit my website at gialacqua.com, reach out on Instagram at gialacqua. On the homepage of my website or on the bio link in Instagram, you can download your complimentary copy of From Chaos to Clarity, a 30-day journal for self-discovery and healing. This is Gia signing off with gratitude for your time and energy. Our mic drops, but the movement continues. Until next time, your next chapter is waiting. Take care.
That concludes another empowering episode of Your Future Starts Now. Before we wrap up, I want to thank this incredible community of high-achieving women. Your energy, resilience, and commitment to growth are the driving force behind what we do. If you enjoyed today's episode, please rate it, leave a review, and don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. Your feedback fuels our mission to empower high-achieving women just like you. And of course, share Your Future Starts Now with the extraordinary women in your life who are also on a journey of healing and empowerment. Connect with us on social media, share your thoughts, let us know what topics you'd like to explore in future episodes. Stay connected on Instagram at gialacqua. I encourage you to carry the energy of this conversation into your day and keep on supporting the incredible women around you. Until next time, remember, your next chapter is waiting.